welcome to Active Travel Café at Cycle County, Active County, which is the name of the main conference for active travel in England. And it's actually held in, you probably can't see it from the Zoom, but we're in something grandly titled the Examination School in Oxford, which if you've ever sat an exam in Oxford, I guess is where they have them. And we've got a few of us here today, so we'll be hearing from them a bit later, but just to introduce who I'm with today, we've got Roxanne and Sally, who are regular Active Travel Cafe hosts, but we've also got a couple of guests today. We've got Dan Levy, who is Oxford counsellor and Active Travel champion.
Yep, hello.
And we're also joined by Deegan, head of infrastructure for Active Travel England. So we'll get their thoughts on some things later. Just a quick note on the format of the day, because it is a kind of one-off special on a Wednesday, apart from anything, not Tuesday. So we're only going to run for 45 minutes, and we are going to ask you to put your questions in the chat today, just because we're trying to manage the tech here. So if you put your questions in the chat, Roxanne's going to monitor the chat, and then we'll ask them between us and to the guests. It was really good. Anyone who signed up via Eventbrite, we asked you to submit kind of questions that you wanted to have answered in the session. So we're going to try and touch on those. The main things that came up were things like political will, which has been a big theme of today. Hearts and minds, how do you win hearts and minds, and just sort of tips on campaigning. So I'm sure some of that will come up. Yeah, I've said the stuff about questions in the chat, and if you haven't been to Active Travel Cafe before, we're a forum for anyone interested in walking and cycling and helping move away from a sort of car-dominated society. So whether that's politicians, campaigners, engineers, and all the rest of it. So let's get underway because we haven't got long. So I think I'm going to open by talking about what's called the plenary session this morning. So that was how Active Travel, how the conference got underway this morning, and it really got underway with a bang, really, because the conference was opened by Oxfordshire County Councillor Andrew Gatz, and he talked a bit about all the things that Oxford and Oxfordshire are doing to help this transition. So the workplace parking levy, low traffic neighbourhoods, electric buses, bus gates, etc., etc. And Chris Boardman was on the panel, and it was just a really nice little kind of cameo where Councillor Gatt opened the conference, and Chris Boardman basically kind of thanked him in response and said, you know, thank you for standing up to the vitriol, and thank you because the country needs you to do this. I think it's a really good sort of little anecdote sort of on why we're here in Oxford, because this actually is the kind of hot seat of a lot of what's going on. A lot of the councils have had to, I guess, find a way to kind of hold their nerve through that. So we're going to ask Dan a bit about that in a minute. But before we get into our guests, I thought I'd start by just asking Roxanne and Sally kind of their takeaways from the session this morning. So I'll start with you, Roxanne. Yeah.
I think the big one for me was Philip Wathiel, the Deputy Mayor of Ghent. And I've been fortunate enough to hear him speak. He spoke to Cambridge Cycling Campaign a little while ago, but a really key point that he made is that these kinds of dramatic interventions, and if you're not aware, Ghent implemented a circulation plan, I think it was 2019, just before the pandemic anyway, dramatically over one weekend. And I think because we're looking for really bold interventions, and this was the inspiration for Oxford as well, I'm sure. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be really fast and it can be really quick. And he made this really great point, which I hope I can find in all of my notes from today. He said, it's a shortcut. Get your circulation plan in. You can do it very quickly, and almost overnight, I think they took traffic down by about, I would say, cycling up 60%, public transport use up 12%, collisions down 35%, emissions down 18%, livability up and astronomically. Quick and cheap. It's scalable. I think we could all learn from what happened in Ghent. So he was a very inspirational speaker, and he shared a really funny video at the end, which we'll try and share in a future Active Travel Cafe, because I think it will entertain our many followers. Anyway, I've rambled.
No, and I think what was interesting was that it talks about how that ultimately that cost them 5 million euros.
Yeah.
That was about basically how can they reduce traffic dramatically, and it reduced 40% overnight. Before I get to Sally, were you in that session? What stood out for you?
Well, the stuff about Kent was fantastic. I was speaking with some of my fellow councillors about whether we could dare make the video they made, and we thought probably didn't go down spectacularly badly with the wider public, but it was really impressive. And we're very much taking their lead in what we do here, because lots of the characteristics of Oxford are similar to Ghent, I think. So that was good, and it was great to hear also from recovery of the parliamentary committee on cycling, and my colleague Andrew Gant, of course, which was had lots of good things to say, and Chris Boardman with super encouraging, which is what you want to hear to come from furthers.
Yeah,
so it's great.
One of the things that Philip talked about, even in Ghent, which is now it's been a big success story, is how he got death threats, and he talked openly about how there was a lot of hostility, and I thought it was definitely a telling point, made by Chris Boardman about. He said, took Burnham over to Paris to meet Anne Hidalgo, and she talked about the bouquet she was getting as thanks for implementing all the measures, but Chris was really keen that Burnham heard about the brickbats as well, and the pain he had to go through. So you've been going through a bit of that at the moment in Oxford. What's that been like, and how have you handled that?
I think you probably have to have a fairly thick skin to be a councillor in the first place, but had to be thicker than normal over the last year or so. Because there have been death threats, and there's been opposition that's is difficult to handle. If someone's got a sense of objection to something, you can address that. And some of the stuff we've done, there are some sensible, wrong but sensible objections to some of the things we're doing. And I deeply sympathise with some people whose lives have been changed. But the completely irrational stuff and the stuff that's based on totally wrong information has been more difficult to cope with. So, for the record, we're not going to trap people in the houses and make them apartments to leave. And people are going to be able to go to the shop if they're more than 5 minutes away, and all those sorts of things. So it's been interesting.
Yeah, and I guess as the active travel champion, you are on board with this stuff. Have you had to kind of rally your internal political group fellow councillors and keep how do you have to kind of keep the nerve there? Do you have to try and adopt tactics to do that?
Well, and I think we as administration are completely committed to active travel in this city and the county, and there's quite a lot of commonality among all the people within the coalition that runs Oxfordshire. We are all, one of the things that holds us together is we are committed to doing our bit for combat climate change, reducing car dependency, giving people better air to breathe, those sort of things. So we have all that in common. Different parts of the alliance represent different places, and different places have different views of things. So it does depend a little bit on what local residents think about stuff, and have a different view in some bits of Oxford to some bits of Oxfordshire. But broadly speaking, I think we are all, we've tied our nail to this particular mark that we are going to.
So you've not had any wobble?
Not within the group, we absolutely haven't.
Yeah.
There's some discussion about timing things and how quickly we do stuff and the order we do things in. But no, I think we've been pleasantly, surprisingly united in what we're doing. And that's made my job as Active Travel Champion easier in many ways. So I don't really have to handle my fellow councillors too much. There's stuff to do to try and make things happen more quickly, and encourage officers to do stuff. And there's definitely with residents and businesses and other people that it happens. But no, I think we're committed.
Yeah,
We've got an election coming up, which will challenge us, I'm sure, but we are all committed to.
yeah. Well, I can't come to Sally in a minute and then Brian, but on the subject of the election, one of the questions that was asked of Ruth Cadbury in that opening session this morning was about the fact that, you know, we're hopefully moving towards an election and you know, were the Labour Party senior leadership on board enough with this agenda? And I guess as a kind of member of the front bench, she was, you know, stuck to the party line really, but said that, which I found interesting, was that they are going through the manifesto process kind of now, and that at the end of July, the Labour Party will be hearing from, you know, the Labour Party groups and union. And obviously, if you're a member of the Labour Party, you would know this, but I didn't. So yeah, it's amazing how kind of far back these things happen. You know, the Labour Party getting its manifesto together already, but obviously she said that, you know, they're not going to tip their hand to other parties and show them what's going to be in the final manifesto. Obviously, we don't have a date for the election. So so I thought that was really interesting. And after the session where I asked that question, I've been told privately that, you know, that some of the members of the Walking and Cycling Alliance are seeking to really get in there with the Labour Party leadership and make sure that this agenda is top and front and centre. So that was interesting. Perhaps there is still a job to be done there. Right, Sally, what were your takeaways from the session this morning?
I mean, I think a lot of things have been covered, but I suppose Chris Baldwin starting with that slide with the, you know, young girls cycling and chatting together, and I think we all have to kind of keep coming back to why are we doing this, and what do we want? And I think he has some key points. What kind of place do we want to live in, and what do we want for our children and the society? And then I think he thought about. He actually kind of made us all think, what are we doing? You know, what are we doing to support that? And particularly perhaps what we do to support councillors who are, you know, in the firing line really. And to what extent might we be part of the status quo, you know, propping that up? And I think that those are always useful reminders.
Yeah, I wrote down here, Chris basically said, let's stop thinking that we need to go back to the evidence, myth busting. And you know, why the main problem, why isn't this happening, is because of fear of loss and loss aversion, which I thought was really interesting. And his suggestion is that you counter that through the fear of missing out, so that we should ultimately be, and we talk about this a lot on Active Travel Café, we should ultimately be seeking to demonstrate the benefit and build alliances with people outside of the kind of active travel bubble. So yeah, that's very much what we were hearing from him, and I think that will help with that Labour Party challenge. Not that they're a done deal with the election. Right, Brian, let's hit you. So welcome back to Active Travel Café. I think we last saw you in September last year. So yeah. So maybe we could just ask a slightly broader question to start with, which is how's it going? You know, is it tough in there with the cuts and things like that, and you holding your nerve?
Oh yeah, no, I've got to talk about what we've been talking about so far though, but give me a minute and then I'll tell you. Just what we've got to remember is every time anybody does a full survey, like a representative one, and they get a proper survey coming in, the majority of people in the support are making better street environments. So that's why, so we've got like a majority that wants it. And sometimes that can get forgotten in the drama of an individual consultation, but that is not as representative or as professional as the whole picture. Even like AA members want this, you know, like that's what we're finding. So from a political point of view, you know, you've got a majority. You might not seem it when you're in the weeds. And my job at Active Travel England is to support you, to support everybody who's trying to like do these things, because we know what the government and we know what we've done the master. This is what people want, and that's what the Department of Data says, and that's what we find out every time we survey. And I do like recommend to local authorities, if it seems like there's an overwhelming feeling against it, do a proper survey with a proper representative sample, and then you know that it's established people want it. And then I often tell people to look at a kind of, given that, and a kind of how about kind of approach. Now, given that climate change is real, how about we tackle it in this, that, and that way? But like if you go into like we're thinking of like a shifting the parking slightly in your street, and they go, climate change isn't real. And then you've got like 6 people in the council trying to address them with the latest science from the UN and stuff. They go, no, that's a given. I'm sorry, that's the kind of given, and I'm being flippant because that's what I do on this. So I'm not going to be on for a year. But like, there's a serious point there, and so like every time there's been a political leader thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose my seat. Like every time there's an election come along, that majority starts speaking. And actually, we did want that. Laws that work against. So there is like it's well evidenced on this side. How Active Travel England are going. I'll
Back to go on that, Dan, have you conducted that kind of baseline surveys here that you had to? Is that been something you needed to do?
Well, we do consultation, we do, because we're obliged to do it, and we want to do it anyway. And we also do surveys after things happen. Right, that's really right, and obviously people do what the good things we're doing. Having said that, I mean, we shouldn't dismiss the opposition to the active travel things we're doing, because that is real as well. They tend to be noisier rather than numerous, but they are out there. We just have different council elections, and I don't think it made a difference at all to who won, who didn't win, which was reassuring.
Right. Thank you. Right, back to you then.
When there's political will there, that really helps the officers as well, because you know, like when we're doing like the embankment superhighway, like if you'd asked the officers, should we do that? They said no, it's going to cause a lot of congestion, that would be really complicated. But there wasn't a choice. The mayor said it's happening, so then we shifted into, given that it's happening, how do we make the least worst situation for everybody? And that's the kind of nuance of the consultation. Okay, this is going to affect my business. How? What do you need? Where do you need the space? What if we did it like this and we trusted it to? That's the kind of conversation that you want to have. So that's good, rich stuff that affects the quality of the scheme. And so just box that one off. Did you want me to talk about something else?
I will in a sec, but it just reminded me of a point that Philippe from Ghent made about data, was that they now, one of the key metrics they now measure, which I thought was really interesting, is young people's journeys, under 25-year-olds. And you know, that felt like, and that's where they've seen some of the biggest shifts. Is 70% of under 21-year-olds, I think, was the age, now walking and cycling rather than driving. And that, I thought that was really interesting, because we're kind of focusing on who's benefiting, you know, Chris Baldwin's point, who's benefiting, what are the outcomes, what young people, and so they're measuring that and they're holding that up as a stat. And I just, you know, perhaps that's the lesson to places as well.
I think the reality is,
Yeah,
when you do this stuff, almost always really unpopular or sounds unpopular when you're doing it, that people are averse to change in many ways. But once things are in and embedded, they're either going to work, and they normally do, and people accept them and wonder why they didn't do it earlier, or if they really are flawed, then we can change them. But doing nothing really isn't an option.
yeah. And what have you done to get you through that sort of picky period? Ruth Cadbury was saying, you know, like, actually don't forget, you are an advocate and you want this stuff, that if you're in an area where there's, you know, a bit of a backlash going on, that let those politicians know you support them, because don't assume that, and they really need friends at that time. What have you done that's helped, or any little anecdotes for us?
Well, one really good thing we're doing in Oxfordshire is 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, where we're not imposing them on anyone, but what we've said to all parishes and town councils, that if they ask for them, then we'll put them in free of charge. And try by even places that you think would be really, really car focused, 120-mile-an-hour speed limits, because everyone wants a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit outside their own house, and for their kids to come walk to school and you're not going to get run over. And virtually everybody has asked for one, but it's been sort of pulled from the community rather than us imposing stuff on people. And again, there've been lots of shouting about that, but the majority of people want them, and they've been very popular.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to have to let you go down, because you're speaking. Right.
I have, I don't know how to go.
Thanks, Dan.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now, who's Cyclox, which is the Oxford campaign. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
And see you at the drinks later.
People like Alison are good, because they shout that they're not doing stuff quickly enough. That's really, really helpful counterbalance to people shouting from the other side. So before I go, keep shouting at me out.
Thanks, Dan. Right, well, Alison, do you want to pop in? And then while you're just taking your seat, Brian, can you give us a bit of a lowdown on the general active travel and anything?
I'll quickly interrupt. The speakers are playing up, mics are playing up a little bit, so we just have to speak nice and loudly.
Okay.
Yeah, all you wish for can be very loud.
Well,
Yeah, come up close. We did all the tests, it was all perfect, but something's gone awry. So anyway.
so yeah, floor is yours for a moment, Brian.
Yeah, everything is peachy and green. Well, it's very exciting because we've got nearly our full complement of staff, which is very exciting. So yeah, we're up about 85, maybe a little bit more now. They're all coming in, but like 98 starts cap. So it's really interesting that the third person that officially joined, so there was kind of like me, to have like a whole bunch of people I can call on. It's great. Like the last time I did one of these, I was sat in a room for 2 days just doing like a second to everybody. It was great, but it was just every half an hour turnaround for 2 days. It's a bit much, though I did like it. This time I haven't actually been in the room where they've been doing that all day because I've got a team to do it. So there's lots of us there to help. That's the big news. You know, we're settling down in York. The office is great, and but we have got quite a good like a regional spread as well. And just a shout out to our regional engagement managers who are all in place. So there's people placed around the country to help people out as well. So yeah, we've basically been growing the organisation, showing that we're serious. The kind of big change is that it was always the intention to look at every single scheme from the government, but like there was a little bit of a focus on the Active Travel Fund. But I always wanted to get my sticky fingers and everything, and we're definitely in the foothills of doing that now. We're getting arrangements with all the other teams, and I'm trying. I remember my original plan to the people putting together. So can I take absolutely everything? Can I absolutely everything come across? And that's always been my dream since childhood. And we're getting close to that, albeit there's a whole team to do it. So yeah, things are progressing nicely. Really, we're putting papers out. We're working well with the ministers, and yeah, it's cracking on with the program. We know we had like inflation issues and trying to get construction rolling again. But we are like performing better than most other industries in terms of the stuff that we're putting on the ground. And the active travel schemes are quite an attractive offer because we can turn them around quickly. I'm often pointing out to the Treasury types that the biggest ever mobilisation in transport was in the Emergency Active Travel Fund, where people were just throwing out miles and miles of stuff a week. When it can take you 10 years to do a mile of motorway at like 100 times the price. So we're quite an attractive offer. We can tie that together with the output that we're getting and make a strong case for that. I think we can make an overwhelming case for massive investment. Is the whole reason with the government game to get lots of investment in active travel. And yeah, with people like Chris Borden leading the way, and then you know Chris Whitty and people like that, you know, enjoying it. So I'm not out much. Not saying much, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and it's all very positive.
I was in your session earlier and you were talking about how you're starting to build and you want local authorities to provide the evidence on, you know, how the schemes that have gone in have helped improve things like road safety or whatever, so that reinforces that evidence case. Do you want to just talk to that?
Yeah, well, kind of in the past, the way it's worked, so particularly with devolution, the government in general, they kind of give money, say it's a fund, but it's more like a grant, and then people just do what they want with it, and then we make a case for more. And the whole point of Active Travel England being there is to check that the outcomes are being delivered as favourable as possible. So it's getting that information backwards and forwards from the local authorities, which is key. Then we can go, look, lots more people did use it, and it's safer, and it's nice, and then we should do loads more of this stuff, shouldn't we? So yeah, it's really important for us to get an idea of what's happening. There's a different way of working, you know, from just giving a grant to actually, now this is a fund, what you're doing. But I think the authorities are rising to the challenge on that. I'm hoping we'll get more and more data because it helps us make a stronger case. Like all the data on every inch of motorway locked down, loaded, everybody understands it. We need that active travel to get that to this period.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Some questions from the crowd. So following up directly on that, we've got a question about, quick one, is the list of Active Travel England regional engagement managers public? If so, can that be found? I know I've met Alice, but...
Yeah, is it? But yeah, I don't know. Well, you can always just like email the contact and we'll tell you.
There we go. Email Active Travel England contact, they'll tell you, and they'll get so sick of the emails, they'll put a list up somewhere.
No, I don't have to deal with them. So
Chamberlain is the Northwest one, formerly British Cycling. Yeah,
yeah.
so that was really good news.
Yeah. And following on from you were talking about the grant, how is Active Travel England coping with planning applications given your new status? Have you been looking at them yet?
They're coping really well. They had like it was different from the inspection side of it because we just jumped into a hot mess of just like the busiest year ever in schemes. They kind of had a little bit of time to plan it and get the people in place and get the process established, and they've managed it really smoothly. I have to say, it almost makes me sick how smooth they've done it compared to inspection chaos that we've had last year. But yeah, they are coping well. Some really good people in there. They've got a really locked down system. I think people are responding well to it. So yeah, they're 100% on target at the moment.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, so one that I think is active for the panel, coming in from Steve. General one about today. How are we describing the buzz at the conference? Are we upbeat? Are we energized? Are we,
Good question.
Yeah.
Let's go round the panel. Alison, we haven't heard from you yet. How would you've chaired one
I
session?
shared one session,
Both another one.
another one. So the first one was on information, and the second one was on on Vision Zero, road safety, road danger reduction, and then obviously I heard you talking about the plenary session at the start, and it's just felt a lovely occasion. I mean, there's a lot of buzz, conversations outside those plenary sessions and the parallel sessions is wonderful, and there are lots of like-minded people here. I mean, the disinformation one, I did wonder if there was going to be some antis there who would purchase the ticket and present, might be, it was that wasn't the case, but so I think there's no evidence there are difficult people here at all. I think maybe we are talking a bit in a bubble because we are passionate about this topic, but generally I think it helps us all to hear what's going on, and particularly pivotal times of Active Travel.
That's it. And we'll come back to that this information session in a minute. So I'm keen to hear some headlines from that. But yeah, Brian, how would you describe the buzz?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I only turned up at lunchtime. I missed the plenary, but yeah, I've heard good things about it. But yeah, it's great. I mean, it's always good coming to Oxford, city of learning and culture, station. I agree with that. So yeah, people are deep diving a little bit more than perhaps. So sometimes it can be a really surface level one, but people are jumping into it. And I tried a little bit of that in my session to go way too far on some point, just to see who's with me. But if you can't go too far in an intellectual way in Oxford, try to do it. So that's the buzz level that I like when people are still following you like down a long road of complicated situations. So I'm loving it. Yeah, it seems really good.
Right, with kind of how much innovation there is, and sort of like, and I've been to lots of these things, and you think, is it just going to be similar talks? And actually, it's not. It's been a lot of new ideas and killing other ideas. Well, actually, I suppose one of the biggest things has been definitely the AI, the data session, and the other session that I went to on mixed modes, both strongly feature AI and how cameras recording movements of people, movements of cycling, walking, and how that's been used in lots of quite interesting ways. But also, I guess the question for you, Brian, but one thing that came up a lot, particularly in the data session, is those gaps we've touched on before, and particularly around young people. And we used to collect that data on travel to school, and now we don't. And is there any plan to try and improve that kind of data collection?
Yeah, absolutely. I probably should have done a little bit of an overview of the team because I thought about mine a lot, but we have got quite a big data and analysis team. It's very exciting. There's some real big brains in that side of things, people like Professor Robin Lovelace, and we're going to deal with the Alan Turing Institute as well to get, they're the AI specialists in this area. So we're trying to forge really exciting new innovative tools ourselves to help the industry out and make them all kind of free. So yeah, we're excited about that as well. from my side of things, from inspection, also from the planning side, we looked at the sheer total of stuff that we were going to get through and go, we're not going to cope with this. We need like 10 times the amount of people. But then me and the director of planning said, well, if we gave up a few staff to make a really strong data team, then we're going to be a little bit smarter, and then we might have a chance of influencing things in a kind of clever way. So we're really hoping that comes in. I don't think we can really perform to the best of our ability unless we get on top of the data that's coming in and out. And so, yeah, I'm excited about that.
Traveling and robots. Yeah, good idea.
Yeah, he said that at the start when he said clone Deegan, and I was like, no, don't do that. No, we need less of me and more robots for sure.
But the 10% you haven't recruited yet, is that you're building them, making your robots?
Yeah. I think we can do better. I've got several suggestions
Okay.
improving the model.
Spin in there, Roxanne.
There's lots of questions. They're quite specific, not necessarily about what we're doing here today. But I think people want to make the most of having you here, Brian. So excellent. Okay, so we've got here. I'm sorry, I've copied them, so I've lost the names of who sent them. But we've got our politicians. We're very much in favour at Cyclox County, Active County in Chelmsford. Here in Colchester, 4 years on, we are seizing that so little has been achieved with £4 million. So how do we as campaigners go from here? I guess at places like this, it's really easy to have everybody saying all the right things, but when it comes to doing it, how do campaigners push for that? And I suppose after you, Brian, Alison might have something to say on that too.
Sure, yeah, so like a sort of theory a little bit. Remember when I trained the campaigners in Greater Manchester? The kind of Cllr that first hand of that to move from like asking who can give you what you want, and then trying to influence that so they give you what you want. Like I can't give you what you want. It's your local councillors that are going to make those decisions. So in the training session I did for the campaigners in Greater Manchester, it was all like, well, how to move from being less of a campaigner and more of an activist. Like, and that can go positively. You can reinforce, like we just heard from a brilliant council, needs all the backing you can get. That's activism, not the person who can give you what you want. So support them where you can. If it's not going the other way, they're the only people that can give you what you want. So you've got to find a way of making it work, and you've got to persuade them. And you can get to them, like when it might be difficult for officers to persuade some of the councils and the like who are making these decisions. You've got access to them as a member of the public, like influence it, look at, you know, what's going to change it. Remember the exercise I did of looking at, well, what are their majorities? How like one survey can get with like 5,000 people saying this, but they'll know, oh, I'm only in by a majority of 1,000. Oh my God, if I lose those, you can have a really strong impact and influence on your local politician, but get to know them and work with them. No one else is going to do it for you. That's the takeaway.
And before we bring Alison in, I wanted to actually acknowledge that at the start of the session this morning, Councillor Gant, the chair and exec member, basically praised the local active travel lobby for their role in helping with this. And I've written down a quote, we couldn't do it without them. And I heard you speak earlier, Alison, about, you know, the fact that you've got funding for roles, and I've just been hugely impressed by kind of the level of coordination and also, you know, how influential you seem to be. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Obviously Chelmsford, you might not know the area, but how do you manage to kind of coordinate everything and make such an impression?
Well, I think it's not only Cyclox. We've got Robin Tucker in the room, who's Oxfordshire Cycling Network. And I think one of the things we have done, and I think Roxanne, we met with you yesterday, talked through how we as a group of active travel activists and advocates have worked together. And I do think it was actually until about 2018 when Andrew Gilligan came and talked to us on the basis of his report called, I wasn't forgotten the name of the report, Running Out of Road. And he addressed us and he said, divided, you are lost. You've got to come together, you've got to work together and have a single voice. And I think, so we did that. We created a coalition of health streets and active travel. And I think that's been a very, very powerful way of moving forward. And of course, then in 2021, we had an election and a change in the colour of the county council. And I feel, you know, they've been very brave, our councillors, and driving through a new strategy and a local transport and connectivity plan. And they need all the help they can get, because you've heard the amount of hostility that they've experienced. I think a lot of threats, and are holding their nerve, and we need to be with them, really pushing them. And yes, as Dan Levy said, maybe we're feeling that in 2050 is not a good, but it's far too far away for a Vision Zero. London's to 2041. We want to bring it forward to 2030 for urban areas. I think obviously car-on-car collisions out in the rural areas is very much more difficult to tackle. But so we are pressing, but we are also supporting.
Brilliant. Any more questions, Roxanne?
Plenty. We won't get through them all, so I'm trying to follow a theme. So very specific to this one, will the regional engagement managers be talking to campaigners?
Yes.
There we go. Love it. Okay, excellent. Next one.
In Manchester, we definitely had an initial suggestion that happened. So
Yeah.
I agree with
I think there's any reason not.
Yeah. Yeah, that is part of their job. When it comes to my side, the actual getting stuff built, we will need to keep really clear lines with the supply chain. Terrible word for local authorities. So we can't, but the regional engagement is part of their remit.
Yeah.
And we've got stakeholder teams as well. So yes. So I'll pass anything over to them to deal with.
Could I ask, Brian, one of the things that we are getting involved in a lot is developments, and often we are in a pit of despair about the quality of the connectivity, particularly outside. And I think that's going to be such a critical role, the connectivity of development with the local.
Again, pass that information through the regional engagement manager and the planning team.
Yeah. Thank you.
Brilliant. So hotline to the engagement managers. Will Active Travel England standardise and provide an LC whip template?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, I've been wanting for a year to update the LC whip guidance and to bring in a bit.
But the investment plan, which is ultimately what the statutory document that guides what's happening in the local authority. So
It's just really a way of deciding what routes you're going to do in what priority order, the ones with the highest propensity for walking and cycle. So there's more of a strategic data-led way of getting the network together, which is great, but I do want that kind of local network view as well. So we're hoping, I can't give dates anymore now for things, but I do want to update the LC whip guidance so we can have a bit more of a fine mesh network. I always describe it as a list of the hardest possible things to do, and in that order. Whereas how about putting a crossing near that school? So we crack on with that while we're waiting for the big strategic routes to come through. So I think, we need to have a richer, bigger pot of all the stuff we need for active travel, and that's what I want to get into the new guidance, but still working on that.
So what about where places are putting things in that aren't meeting LPN 120? So Ruth is saying in her patch that they're consulting on putting in painted non-mandatory cycle lanes and shared use lanes don't meet the guidelines, will end up taking money and expertise to rip out. So is Active Travel England getting involved in stopping things like this from happening?
Well, so here's how our involvement works. So we'll go out and inspect it and we'll flag these issues, and then the local authority can either fix them, or they say, we didn't have enough money, and then we go, okay, should we program it to give you some more money? So there's a willingness to change, or they can say, don't care, whatever, it is what it is. So the is what it is, now it gets them flagged with what we call a record of non-compliance. And that's the sort of data that feeds into their capability rating. So it's a bit more process. If I won't turn up and shout at you to stop doing something, but it will be processed and gone, that authority isn't ready to do stuff of that complexity, so that affects the funding that you can get access to going forward. So that's kind of how it works. So we don't want people to be overreaching. It used to be, you can do anything you want as long as it's a pop-up cycle lane down High Street. We go, well, that's the hardest possible thing we can do. So people wanted money to do maintenance and then find themselves trying to do these tricky things, not having the capability. We have to acknowledge that, help them get up to the point where they can do it, but also not give them huge amounts of government money if we don't think they have got the capability to do it. So that's the kind of process and how it works. So we're not stopping, we're working to get the best outcomes with everything that's in train, but going forward, the types of infrastructure and the kinds of investment you get should be matched to what you're ready to do.
Yeah.
And political will is the strongest element of that, just to tie into the theme of the second.
Yeah,
Professional that I am.
well, I think, yeah, the question earlier about what's the mood been, it feels kind of like, you know, political will is the main talking point, and just sort of unified feeling of like, we really need to, you know, do this together, and in quite a sort of stoic but upbeat kind of way. We're going to finish in about 5 minutes, so I'm going to ask, we'll have a couple more questions, but I'm also going to ask people just to post a bit of feedback in the chat as well before we go, because we do hope to do this again at another time next year, or maybe other events. So let us know how it's gone before we log off tonight. So any more questions? I've got a couple more.
So many. Great, we're crowdsourcing contact details for regional engagement managers. We've even got some of them in the session today, so that is brilliant to know. Something that really relates to a session that I went to today, which is about local design codes. So where local authorities are working out their own design codes. Will Active Travel England have any input into local authority design codes? But also, it sounded to me like they're a bit of potentially would like it if you did this, not necessarily that the local authority could make a developer do that if it's not in the local plan or something. So
Yeah.
Active Travel England put any pressure on making sure they use as well.
Well, yeah, like the biggest document that dictates what we do will be management streets, particularly the next one that comes out, which kind of sets the framework for how you approach streets. We'd want to see that like reflected within design codes, but specifically how you do it on the street. Like it's hard at a national level to say you do it like this, because everybody's got access to different materials depending on what the nearest quarry is and what the look and feel of the town is and the ability. You don't want to say it's like this and it's like that. You want to say, well, work within your own code. So we set the overall framework, and what we can do is look at it and make sure it's in line and tell them how it's going to be assessed when we bring it across in the tools. But fundamentally, design codes usually are really good. It's just then you go, way built into that then. We're still going to see it implemented, so yeah, we're happy to advise, and we want to see that framework's followed.
Okay, before we go back to the questions, let's finish with those. I thought it'd be good just to, because we had a couple of sessions that we were all at earlier, apart from the opening plenary, which we talked about. It'd be great to get maybe each of our kind of top line takeaway from those sessions. So I don't know, maybe I'll start with you, Sally.
Yeah, so the first one I went to was the data session, which I've already mentioned. And I think one of the big takeaways from that was that we are not necessarily collecting lots of quantitative data, but we know we need to, and we know there are gaps, but that we are perhaps less good at collecting that qualitative data, and also we're less good at measuring things that aren't mobility. So I think we talked about school streets in that session, and there was a sort of, you know, if your success is based on mode shift, does it need to be, you know, just the fact that you created a really enjoyable space to be in when you arrive at school, when you leave school, are people staying there in that space longer? And there's some discussion around that in that session. Some interesting points about, you know, collecting qualitative data and what you do with it. And then the other session that I went to, the mixed mode, that there was also the bus stop bypass, and sort of 2 talks on that. And some quite interesting ideas about how you help visually impaired people cross the road, feel comfortable in crossing cycle tracks to get to bus stops.
That's good.
Really
Bit of a hot potato.
Yeah.
And on the point about the data, interesting again, Philip from Ghent talking about how, with hindsight, he wished that he'd looped in the whole business side of his council or whatever it's called in Ghent, because ultimately there are a load of benefits that we create business, but that wasn't kind of captured as part of the journey. So and often that's where some of the opposition can be perceived to be coming from, can't it? So yeah, business data. Right. What about yourself, Roxanne? Key takeaways from any of the sessions earlier?
Yeah, we had an amazing session that Alison was chairing, and We had
The misinformation one.
this is, yeah, or winning hearts and minds. We had a great speaker from a local campaigner talking about the work he was doing on the local school street, and had someone else with him, like, what's this person going to say? And it turns out this was Sumita, and she was staunchly against the school street. She was the one arguing at the barriers, trying to get passes to get through. You know, it had a really huge impact on her life. She's a stressed single mom trying to get the kids to school, doing her trip chaining, getting to work, not happy about it. But clearly she didn't just come today to tell us how she wasn't happy about the school street. Eventually, one of the other parents was able to break through the barrier and have a conversation with her and say, would like to help you, would like to explore some options. And it turned out that her kids got taught how to cycle, someone else helped her kids get to school on a bike. She was therefore had more freedom, she could get a full-time job. She ended up cycling, she even cycled here today.
I did cycle into the
Yeah,
city centre.
yeah.
It was inspiring.
Yeah, this is a heart and mind that really had been won over. I was sitting there going, welcome to the cult. But really, I think there's a lot to learn there. And a key thing she said, I think 5 people wanted to ask the same question. Is there anything we could have done to win you over earlier? And she said, no, you had to put it in. I had to go through that process. And maybe we have to accept that sometimes it's going to be rough, but we've got to show people because they're not going to engage. They might not see the vision. That said, there was still some lessons to learn about. Did enough work happen to really understand what the impact is on some people's lives and trying to get that understanding earlier on. But ultimately, she said, keep doing it. So guess we have to.
And I felt out of that session, the whole issue of storytelling.
Yeah.
That, you know, because we had quite a lot of kind of more dry stuff about, you know, data and things. And then wham, we had this woman who just wowed everybody, and those stories are needed more and more. And I, you know, I certainly want her to write an article in. We get a weekly column in the Oxford Mail, and I want there to be a feature on that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
The local, whatever your local BBC TV regional programme is, newspapers are good, but TV is even better. So those kind of stories are really visual. What about you, Brian? Have you managed to get to any sections? Or
Well, I come down, yeah, the only session I've been at is my own. I thought I was fantastic.
So I was in Brian's session, and I was the annoying person at the front asking why all the time. And
That was my good takeaway.
there were 2 things that really struck me. One was what I'm now calling the bin lorry metaphor, which is ultimately why our streets are designed the way they are. Do you want to just share the bin lorry kind of?
Bin lorry effect, if you Google bin lorry effect, there's a whole report on it and saying the damage that design parameters done. So yeah, no, I went into the Newtonian physics because we're in the examination hall. Nobody knew the formula for the centrifugal force. I was very disappointed. But I was explaining how that related to why it takes so long to cross the side of the road. That everybody's been looking at the mass of a bin lorry turning at 30 miles an hour and trying to track that with minimal like opposing force on it. And so it was just pure physics.
Because ultimately, the traffic engineers go, well, this bin lorry is going to travel at 30 miles an hour, so we need to design a corner where it won't tip over or hit anything. So the corner needs to be this huge arc, which then means that people take forever. So it's kind of just this constant like why. There is a reason why, but it's because we're prioritising road vehicles over people on foot.
Yeah, I mean the takeaway there was design speed, which like an engineer, when you set a design speed, then you got your vehicles and you just track everything to that design speed. That's the geometrical shape of things. But I always have to let engineers know that it's not fixed, even though we fixed it to design, it's still a variable and things can slow down. So that was the takeaway.
Or 20-mile-an-hour limit. Sometimes people are like, oh, well, it doesn't really affect it accidents that much or crashing, or whatever. But actually, there's a knock-on effect that you don't see if you set that speed a bit lower, which
exactly.
the engineers then can design a curve that isn't huge arc, but is much that right.
You tweeted that thing about the sweep and how you said that was your favourite page.
Oh, yeah, manual streets, yeah. Yeah.
There's no reason why a lorry has to be.
Well, they managed to get around Victoria Street perfectly well.
Yeah, just track them across the entire width of the carriageway.
Everything.
Right, we were going to be wrapping up in a minute, but let's hear from Sally. Sally, what were your takeaways from the sessions you went through? Oh, you've gone there. Sorry, I'm going this way. Roxanne.
Yep, I can add some more. I went through a session about, I guess, beyond the city and designing for the region. And a nice takeaway I had is the officers from Oxfordshire County Council started saying how great Oxfordshire Cycling Network had been in influencing the work that they had done. So pigs for campaigners, well done Oxford, you got a really good name check there. And there was a story about a rural lane in Kent that had to be closed for some reason, and how it became a mecca for walking, cycling, no more fly tipping, hedgerows and wildlife recovering. And so we are seeing things happening in rural areas, and I believe that I don't know if it was an experiment or a permanent scheme in Oxfordshire where they've put some bollards at the end of a rural lane.
That's permanent.
Permanent,
Chiltern and near Chiltern.
amazing. Yeah,
You do.
yeah. Yeah, so to me, that's just an easy way of tackling in my area. So it was really nice to see a positive story about that. And I'd like to go and cycle on that if you'll have me back. Well, I'm going to go look at that.
Cool. Any last takeaways from anyone?
I've got one more actually. That so Transport for London have been doing trials on having a green pedestrian light, which changes to red when there's traffic, and they found that's really, really successful for compliance, for pedestrians are more likely to cross safely, as desired, and it doesn't seem to impact driving compliance. So I think that would be a really great thing.
But I mean, just if you do that, remember, Hull did it 30 years ago, Bristol did it like 15 years ago, like that's been trialled a few times. They don't make as big a fuss because everyone's just watching London and respect to the Transport for London to do it, but the fact that Hull flushed the door open on that is like, needs to be recognised.
I'll just share a couple of headlines I went through. I'm a bit kind of obsessed with road danger, and I just think, we need to move the debate away from, it disadvantaging my road journey and onto the fact that the roads are dangerous and aggressive driving and parking and the impacts it's having on people. And I think when you do that, everyone definitely agrees. Went to the session where Kevin Smith, the police officer from West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire, really great stuff from him. And but it was sort of positive, but a bit depressing in that ultimately it's still down to, can you find the officer in your force who's interested and cares about this stuff and has been given a remit to focus on road danger. But if you can, and he has, then you can make real headway. And some tips there. One about making it clear that enforcement reduces harm, which reduces damage, which reduces cost, and that needing to be a central message because all forces are facing cuts. And that also going back to what people really want, all surveys will show that people really do want road safety tackled and roads made safer. I also picked up a little snippet from Ruth Cadbury earlier on road danger reduction, which was in their recommendation. She also chairs the Road Safety All-Party Parliamentary Group. They are going to recommend that we should have a road danger reduction commissioner, which I believe would be, Chris Boardman's kind of ally, but working with a sort of different brief. And also they're going to recommend a standardised process for third-party reporting, which again, when you hear from people like Kevin earlier, it's a really, every force does it differently. There's absolutely no standardisation whatsoever. So yeah, road danger. That was a few little takeaways there. And you shared that. You were in that session as well.
I shared that.
You shared.
So no, I know.
You spoke.
No, I think.
Yeah. So I think what we'll do is we're just approaching 6, so we've run over how long we said we would, but I think that's been really good. If there's any final question that might work to put to the whole panel, we could end on that. And if anyone's got any feedback for us
do put it in the chat, because we'll save the chat and we can review that before we go. We've got another day of the conference tomorrow, and we're going to be here, and next week's Active Travel Café will share back some of the headlines. We'll be back to our sort of normal format next week. So do let us know if there's anything particular you want us to look at tomorrow, and we'll get into that session and report back, because we are your eyes and ears.
Well,
What do you
I'll just
reckon,
say our audience has not been holding back in the feedback. Yes, we will fix the audio. I promise we went above and beyond, and it's something's just gone wrong at the final minute. So if we get to come back, well, hopefully we can sort out the audio or invest in something even better. I will say the other questions have been very, very specific. So let's not get into that this afternoon. But we had a hashtag, I agree with Brian. So there we go, there's our new hashtag. We're getting lots of thank yous. And we had over 50 attendees at our peak. So pretty good for an unusual day for us. So I just want to say thanks to everyone for joining us. And if you like this and you'd like us to do it again next year with better audio, let us know and we'll make the case to the organisers.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks everyone. See you next week, and we'll sign off now.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.